19 degrees. Christmas Eve. A widowed mom steps out of the post office and sees an elderly couple huddled on a metal bench, frozen tears on the woman's cheeks, while the man sits coatless, trying to keep her alive. They've been waiting since 5:30 a.m. for their son. He never came. Sarah could have done what everyone else was doing. Look away, hurry to the warmth, tell herself it wasn't her problem. But she didn't. Because the moment Dorothy's shaking hands reached for Harold's sleeve, Sarah saw something she couldn't ignore. Two people still trying to protect each other, after their own family decided they were disposable. Christmas Eve fell on a Tuesday. Sarah had worked the weekend shift, and she had Tuesday through Thursday off, her first real break in 3 weeks. She spent the morning wrapping presents she'd bought on her lunch breaks, hiding them in the closet Marcus used to keep his fishing gear in. The kids were at her sister Linda's house, helping bake cookies, giving Sarah a few hours to finish the Santa preparations. She was almost done when she realized she'd forgotten to mail the package. Marcus's mother, Ruth, lived in Arizona. She was 83, in assisted living, and her mind was starting to go. But she still remembered Marcus, still asked about him every time Sarah called, forgetting each time that he was gone, making Sarah tell her again and again that her son had died. It was torture, but Sarah couldn't stop calling. Ruth was the last piece of Marcus she had left outside of her children. Sarah had put together a care package for her, photos of the kids, a blanket Emma, her 7-year-old daughter, had picked out, some of Marcus's old letters she'd found in a shoebox in the garage. Letters he'd written to his mother when he was in college, before Sarah even knew him. She thought Ruth would want them. She thought maybe they'd help her remember Marcus the way he was before the sickness took everything. The package was sitting on the kitchen counter, and the post office closed at noon on Christmas Eve. It was 11:15. Sarah grabbed her coat, her keys, and the box, and she drove. The post office shared a parking lot with the Greyhound bus station. It was one of those small-town arrangements where everything was crammed together. The post office, the bus depot, a little diner called Rosie's that served the best pie in 3 counties, and a laundromat that had been closing soon for about 15 years. Sarah had driven past that bus station 1,000 times. But that day, something made her look. She'd just come out of the post office. The package was on its way to Ruth. Her mind was 100 miles away, thinking about what she still needed to do, picking up the kids, finishing the ham, trying to get through the evening without crying in front of Emma when she asked if Daddy was watching from heaven. And then she saw them, an elderly couple, sitting on the metal bench outside the bus station, the kind of bench that's designed to be uncomfortable so homeless people won't sleep on it. They were huddled together, and even from 30 feet away, Sarah could see the woman was shivering. The temperature that day was 19 degrees, 19. And these two people, they had to be in their 80s, were sitting outside in it. The man had taken off his coat, his thin, worn coat, and he draped it over the woman's shoulders, over the coat she already had on. He was sitting there in just a flannel shirt, his arms wrapped around himself, his breath coming out in visible puffs. Sarah stopped walking. Something about the way they were sitting, the way he was trying to protect her, the way she was leaning into him like he was the only warm thing in the world, it hit her right in the chest. Because that's how Marcus used to hold her. That's how he sat with her in the hospital waiting room when they got the diagnosis. Like he could shield her from the news just by putting his body between her and the world. She should have gotten in her car. She should have driven home. She had 100 things to do and 2 kids waiting for her. But her feet carried her toward that bench instead. As she got closer, she could see more details. The woman's coat was decent but old. Her white hair was pinned back neatly, but strands had come loose and were blowing in the wind. She was small, maybe 5'2", and she looked fragile in a way that made Sarah's nurse instincts kick in immediately. Her lips had a bluish tint, early signs of hypothermia. The man was tall, even sitting down, broad shoulders that had probably been powerful once but had shrunk with age. His face was weathered, deeply lined. His hands were large, and his eyes, when he looked up at Sarah approaching, his eyes were the saddest she'd ever seen. "Excuse me," Sarah said. "Are you folks okay?" The woman looked up at her, and Sarah saw tears frozen on her cheeks. Actual frozen tears. That's how long she'd been crying in the cold. "We're fine," the man said. His voice was gruff, defensive, the voice of someone who'd spent his whole life handling his own problems and didn't know how to ask for help. "Just waiting for our ride." "How long have you been waiting?" He didn't answer, but the woman did. "Since this morning," she said. Her voice was thin, wavering. "Kevin was supposed to come. He said he'd be here by 10. Sarah looked at her phone. It was 11:45, almost 2 hours late, if the woman was telling the truth. But something in Sarah's gut said it was longer than that. "What time did the bus get in?" she asked. The man's jaw tightened. 5:30. 5:30 in the morning. They'd been sitting on this bench for over 6 hours, in 19-degree weather, on Christmas Eve. Let that sink in for a moment. 6 hours. An elderly couple, freezing temperatures, and their son, the person who was supposed to pick them up, was nowhere to be found. "Sir," Sarah said, crouching down so she was at eye level with them, "you need to come inside somewhere. There's a diner right there. Let me buy you some coffee, get you warmed up, and we can figure out what's going on with your ride." "We can't leave," the woman said, and her voice cracked. "What if Kevin comes and we're not here? He won't know where to find us." "Dorothy." The man's voice was gentle now, the gruffness gone. He put his hand over hers. "Dorothy, honey, Kevin's not coming." The woman, Dorothy, looked at him, and in that look, Sarah saw everything. The confusion, the denial, the slow, horrible realization. "He said he would," Dorothy whispered. "He promised. Harold, he promised he'd take care of us." "I know." Harold's voice broke on those two words. "I know he did." Sarah felt like she was intruding on something private, something painful, but she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when every instinct in her body was screaming that something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Harold looked at her for a long moment, sizing her up, deciding whether to trust this stranger who'd stopped when everyone else had walked by. "Our son," he said. "Kevin. He sold our house 3 months ago. The house Dorothy and I lived in for 52 years. Raised him in that house. I built half of it with my own hands." He paused, swallowed hard. "He said he was moving us in with him, and his wife. Said it was time. With Dorothy's, with her memory issues. Said he'd take care of everything." "Harold," Dorothy said softly. "Don't." But Harold kept going. Like once he started, he couldn't stop. Like he needed someone, anyone, to hear what had been done to them. "He put us on a bus yesterday. Said he'd pick us up here, drive us to his place in time for Christmas." We were excited. Harold laughed, but there was no humor in it. First Christmas with the grandkids in 4 years. Dorothy bought presents. Little things. A doll for Lily. A book for Michael. She wrapped them herself, even with her hands shaking. He gestured to 2 small suitcases sitting by their feet. Everything they owned in the world, reduced to 2 bags. 52 years of life. 52 years of memories, of building a home, of raising a family, packed into 2 suitcases that sat on frozen concrete outside a bus station. "Kevin called this morning," Harold continued. 6:15. Dorothy was so happy when she saw his name on the phone, thought he was calling to say he was on his way. He stopped. His hands were shaking now, and Sarah didn't think it was from the cold. "He said he couldn't do it anymore. Said we were too much. Said Dorothy's condition was getting worse, and he wasn't equipped to handle it. Said we needed to figure something else out." "Figure something else out?" Sarah repeated. "What does that mean?" "That's what I asked him." Harold's voice was hollow now. "He said there were shelters, programs, places that take in people like us." Then he hung up. On Christmas Eve morning, Kevin had called his elderly parents, his mother with dementia, his father who had built him a childhood home with his own 2 hands, and told them they were on their own. Dorothy started crying again, fresh tears that would freeze on her face just like the others had. "He's our son," she said, "our only child. We gave him everything. Everything." Sarah stood there, in that freezing parking lot, and she felt something shift inside her. All the grief she'd been carrying for 8 months, all the pain, all the loneliness, it was still there. But underneath it, something else rose up, something hot, something fierce, anger. Not at Marcus for leaving her, not at God for taking him, but at this Kevin, this man she'd never met, who had looked at his elderly parents and decided they were inconvenient. Who had put them on a bus to nowhere on Christmas Eve and told them to figure it out? What kind of person does that? Sarah thought about Ruth, Marcus's mother, alone in her assisted living facility in Arizona. Marcus had visited her every month until he got sick, called her every Sunday, sent her flowers on her birthday, cards on every holiday. When Ruth started forgetting things, Marcus never got frustrated. He just told her the same stories over and over, laughed at the same jokes, because making her feel loved mattered more than making her remember. Marcus would never have abandoned his mother, and Sarah knew, she knew in her bones, that he wouldn't have let her walk away from these two people. "Okay," Sarah said. "Here's what's going to happen." Harold looked up at her, surprise breaking through the exhaustion on his face. "You're going to let me help you up. We're going to get your bags, and you're coming with me." "Ma'am," Harold started. "We can't." "My name is Sarah," she said. "Not ma'am. And I'm a nurse, so I can tell you right now that your wife is showing early signs of hypothermia, and if you stay out here much longer, you will too. I have a car, I have heat, and I have a house with a guest room that nobody's using." She paused, looking at both of them. "It's Christmas Eve, and nobody should spend it on a frozen bench because their own child threw them away." Dorothy looked at Sarah like she'd just offered her a miracle, and maybe she had. Or maybe Dorothy was offering one to Sarah. Sometimes it's hard to tell who's saving whom. "Why?" Harold asked. His voice was suspicious, but beneath that, Sarah heard something else. Hope, fragile, desperate hope that he was trying not to feel. "Why would you do this? You don't know us." Sarah thought about Marcus. About the way he used to say that you could measure a person's character by how they treated people who couldn't do anything for them. About the way he volunteered at the food bank every Thanksgiving, even when they could barely afford their own turkey. About the last thing he said to her before he died. "Take care of people, Sarah, the way you took care of me." "Because it's the right thing to do," Sarah said simply. "And because I think we both need a little kindness right now." Harold stared at her for a long moment. His eyes searched her face, looking for the catch, the angle, the reason this stranger would offer help when his own son had offered nothing but abandonment. But all he found was sincerity. All he found was a woman who had stopped when everyone else walked by. Slowly, Harold nodded. Sarah helped Dorothy to her feet. The older woman was unsteady, her legs stiff from hours of sitting in the cold. Harold grabbed the suitcases before Sarah could offer, his pride still intact despite everything. They walked to Sarah's car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that Marcus had always promised to replace but never got around to, and Sarah helped them into the back seat, cranking the heat to maximum. As she pulled out of the parking lot, Dorothy reached forward and touched Sarah's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Sarah looked at her in the rearview mirror, at Harold, who had his arm around his wife, whose eyes were wet though he was trying to hide it, at these two strangers who had just become her responsibility. "What have I just done?" she thought, but she kept driving. Because sometimes you don't know why you're doing something until it's already done. Sometimes the leap of faith comes before understanding. And sometimes the people who show up in your life at your lowest moment are exactly the people you need. Sarah had no idea, in that moment, how much her life was about to change, how much Harold and Dorothy would change it, how much their son Kevin would try to destroy everything when he finally showed up, and how, in the end, this one impulsive decision, this choice to stop when everyone else walked by, would give her back something she thought she'd lost forever. She still didn't know what she was doing. She had 2 kids at home, well, at her sister's house, but they'd be home soon. She had a Christmas Eve dinner to prepare. She had a grief so heavy some days she could barely get out of bed. And now she had 2 elderly strangers in her back seat, strangers whose own son had thrown them away like yesterday's garbage. What was she thinking? But every time that doubt crept in, Sarah remembered the image of them on that bench. Harold without his coat, Dorothy with frozen tears on her cheeks. 6 hours in 19-degree weather, waiting for a son who was never coming. No, she'd made the right choice. She had to believe that. Sarah's house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch on a quiet street lined with oak trees. She and Marcus had bought it 11 years ago, right after Jake was born. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was outdated. The bathroom needed new tile, and Marcus had been meaning to fix the back porch railing for 3 years before he got sick. But it was home. It was theirs. And now, for however long they needed it, it would be Harold and Dorothy's too. She pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. "This is it," she said, turning to face them. "It's not much, but it's warm, and there's food, and a bed." Harold looked at the house, then back at Sarah. "You're sure about this? You've got a family. We don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Sarah said firmly. "I'm inviting you." "There's a difference." She helped them inside, one arm around Dorothy's waist, to steady her on the icy walkway. The house was quiet. The kids wouldn't be back for another hour, and Sarah was grateful for that. It would give her time to get Harold and Dorothy settled, to figure out how to explain this to Emma and Jake. The living room was modest but comfortable, a worn couch that had seen better days, a Christmas tree in the corner, a real one, because Marcus had always insisted on real trees, and Sarah couldn't bring herself to break that tradition even now. Presents were scattered underneath, wrapped in the same paper she'd used every year, red and green plaid with little gold ribbons. Dorothy stopped in the doorway, staring at the tree. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Harold, look." Harold came up behind her, and Sarah saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. "It's beautiful," Dorothy said. "It's been so long since we had a real tree." Kevin's wife. She said they were too messy, too much work. There it was again, Kevin's wife said. Kevin decided. Kevin couldn't be bothered. Sarah felt that anger flare up again, but she pushed it down. Now wasn't the time. "Come, sit down," she said gently, guiding Dorothy to the couch. "I'll make some tea. Or coffee? Hot chocolate?" "Tea would be lovely," Dorothy said. "Thank you, dear." "Thank you so much." Sarah went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. Her hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, she realized. The adrenaline of doing something impulsive, something completely out of character. Sarah Mitchell didn't bring strangers home. Sarah Mitchell was careful, measured, responsible. She planned things. She thought things through. But Sarah Mitchell, before Marcus died, and Sarah Mitchell after, were two different people. And maybe this new Sarah, this grieving, broken, barely holding it together Sarah, was capable of things the old Sarah never would have considered. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Linda. "Kids are ready. Heading over in 20. They're hyped about Santa. Good luck tonight. Lol 20 minutes. Sarah had 20 minutes to figure out how to explain Harold and Dorothy. She brought the tea out, 3 cups on a tray, with sugar and cream on the side, and found Dorothy admiring the family photos on the mantel. Photos of Emma as a baby, Jake's first day of school, and in the center, in a silver frame, a photo from Sarah and Marcus's 10th wedding anniversary, the last photo they'd taken together before the diagnosis. "Your husband?" Dorothy asked softly, pointing to Marcus's face. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "He has kind eyes," Dorothy said. "Is he at work?" Harold made a small sound, almost a wince. He'd noticed the past tense Sarah had used earlier. He knew. "He passed away," Sarah said quietly. 8 months ago. Cancer. Dorothy's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, honey. Oh, I'm so sorry. And here we are, burdening you on Christmas Eve." "You're not a burden," Sarah said, and she meant it. "You're not. Honestly, this house has been too quiet since he's been gone. The kids and we've been rattling around in here like ghosts. Maybe having some company is exactly what we need." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears again. But this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude, of connection, of one broken heart recognizing another. "You're an angel," Dorothy whispered. "A genuine angel." Sarah shook her head. "I'm just a person who happened to be in the right place. Or maybe you were in the right place. I don't know. All I know is that you needed help, and I could give it." Harold had been quiet through this exchange, sipping his tea, watching Sarah with those sad, analytical eyes. Now he spoke. "Kevin wasn't always like this," he said. "I want you to know that. When he was a boy, he was." He trailed off, searching for the word. "Good. He was a good boy. Helped me in the workshop. took care of his mother when she was sick with the flu, always said please and thank you. Harold, Dorothy murmured. You don't have to. No, I do. Harold set his cup down. This woman took us into her home. She deserves to know who we are. What happened to us? He looked at Sarah. May I? Sarah nodded and sat down in the armchair across from them. Kevin was our miracle baby, Harold began. Dorothy and I tried for years to have children. Doctors said it wasn't in the cards. And then, when Dorothy was 37, we'd all but given up, she got pregnant. Kevin was born on March 15th, 1975, 8 pounds, 6 ounces. Healthiest baby the doctor had ever seen. Dorothy smiled at the memory, even through her tears. He was perfect, perfect little fingers, perfect little toes. We gave him everything, Harold continued. Not spoiled him, mind you. I don't believe in that. But we made sure he had opportunities, good schools, summer camps. We paid for his college, his first car, the down payment on his first house. When he got married, we paid for the wedding. Dorothy insisted on that. I wanted it to be special, Dorothy said softly. It was special, Harold agreed. $15,000 worth of special. But we didn't mind. He was our son. That's what parents do. Sarah thought of her own parents, both gone now. Her father to a heart attack when she was 22. Her mother to a stroke 5 years later. She thought of Marcus's mother, Ruth, alone in Arizona, clinging to memories of a son who would never call again. She thought of Emma and Jake and the lengths she would go to for them. There was nothing she wouldn't do for her children. Nothing. So what changed? She asked. Harold's jaw tightened. He met Valerie. Harold. Dorothy's voice held a warning note. It's the truth, Dot. You know it is. Harold shook his head. Valerie came from money. Old money. Her family looked at us like we were dirt on their shoes. A carpenter and a school teacher. We weren't good enough for their daughter. And Kevin started to see us that way too. That's not fair, Dorothy protested weakly. She's not all bad. She gave us grandchildren. Grandchildren we've seen maybe a dozen times in the past 10 years, Harold countered. Grandchildren whose birthday parties we weren't invited to because we might embarrass Valerie in front of her country club friends. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut glass, and Sarah understood. She understood completely, because this wasn't just about being abandoned at a bus station. This was about years, decades, of being slowly pushed out, slowly diminished, slowly erased from their own son's life, until finally, when they became inconvenient, Kevin could cut them loose without guilt. Dorothy was diagnosed with early-stage dementia 2 years ago. Harold continued, his voice quieter now. The doctors said it was manageable. With medication, with routine, with support, she could maintain her quality of life for years, maybe decades. He reached over and took his wife's hand. But Kevin didn't want to deal with it, said it was too stressful, said watching his mother forget things was too painful for him. Too painful for him, not for Dorothy, who was living it, not for Harold, who watched the love of his life slip away piece by piece. For Kevin, who had to witness it occasionally from the comfort of his 5-bedroom house in the suburbs. When the house became too much for us to maintain, Kevin offered to sell it, Harold said. Said he'd handle everything. Put us up in his guest house. They have a guest house, can you believe that? Until we got settled. So we agreed. We signed the papers. 52 years in that house, and we signed it away because our son said he'd take care of us. He got $300,000 for it, Dorothy said quietly. The house Harold built with his own hands. $300,000. And we never saw a penny, Harold added. He said he was holding it for us, for our care, for our future. But when I asked about putting it in our names, he got angry, said I was accusing him of stealing, said if I didn't trust him, maybe we should find somewhere else to live. Sarah felt sick, actually, physically sick. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just abandonment. This was theft. This was financial abuse. This was a son systematically stripping his elderly parents of everything they had and then throwing them away when they became too much trouble. I'm so sorry, Sarah said. It felt inadequate, pathetically inadequate. But what else could she say? Not your fault, Harold said gruffly. Not your burden to carry. Maybe not, Sarah agreed. But You're here now, and you're safe. And whatever comes next, we'll figure it out together." Before anyone could respond, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway made them all turn toward the window. Sarah's heart rate spiked. Linda's minivan. The kids were home. "That's my sister," Sarah said quickly. "And my children. Emma's 7, Jake's 10. They don't know about," she gestured vaguely, "about any of this. I'll explain. Just give me a minute." She rushed to the front door, stepping outside before Linda could bring the kids in. The cold hit her like a slap, but she barely noticed. Linda was already getting out of the driver's seat, her face split in a wide grin. "Hey, kids are sugared up and ready to—" She stopped, reading something in Sarah's expression. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Nothing's wrong," Sarah said quickly. Too quickly. I need to tell you something before you come in." Linda's eyes narrowed. She was 3 years older than Sarah, a protective big sister to her core. She'd been Sarah's rock since Marcus died, showing up with casseroles and babysitting offers and shoulders to cry on. She knew Sarah better than anyone. "Sarah," Linda said slowly, "what did you do?" "I brought some people home." "What people?" Sarah took a deep breath. "An elderly couple, Harold and Dorothy. I found them at the bus station. Their son abandoned them. On Christmas Eve. They had nowhere to go." "Linda, nowhere." Linda stared at her for a long moment. Then she laughed. Not a happy laugh, but a disbelieving one. "You brought home strangers," she said flatly. "On Christmas Eve, with your kids in the house. They're not dangerous. You don't know that. You don't know anything about them. They could be anyone, Sarah. Con artists, criminals, people who—" "They're an 81-year-old woman with dementia and her 83-year-old husband," Sarah cut in. "They were sitting on a frozen bench for 6 hours because their son told them to figure it out." Dorothy's lips were blue. "Linda, blue. I'm a nurse. I couldn't just leave them there. You could have called someone. A shelter, the police, social services. On Christmas Eve, everything's closed. You know that. So you brought them home?" Linda's voice rose. "Sarah, I know you're going through a hard time. I know this Christmas is going to be brutal without Marcus. But this is insane. This is literally insane." The word hit Sarah like a punch. Insane. Her sister thought she was losing her mind, and maybe she was. Maybe grief had finally cracked something in her brain, made her do things that a rational person would never do. But then she thought of Dorothy's frozen tears, of Harold giving up his coat, of 2 people who had raised a son, built him a life, given him everything, and been thrown away like garbage in return. "Maybe it is insane," Sarah said quietly. "But I'd rather be insane and kind than sane and cruel. Those people needed help, Linda, and I could help them. So I did." Linda opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in Sarah's face must have told her this wasn't a battle she was going to win. "Fine," Linda said finally. "But if anything, and I mean anything, seems off, you call me, immediately. Do you understand?" "I understand. And I'm staying for dinner. I want to meet these people myself." Sarah almost smiled. Classic Linda. If she couldn't talk Sarah out of something, she'd insert herself into the situation to keep watch. It was annoying and comforting in equal measure. "Fine," Sarah agreed. "Stay for dinner. You'll see. They're good people, Linda. Broken people. Like us." Linda's expression softened at that, because she knew how broken Sarah had been since Marcus died. She'd held Sarah through the worst of it, the nights when Sarah couldn't stop crying, the days when getting out of bed felt impossible. If anyone understood brokenness, it was Linda. "Mommy! Mommy!" Emma came barreling around the side of the minivan, her blonde curls bouncing, her face smeared with what looked like frosting. Jake followed more slowly, his hands shoved in his pockets, trying to look cool and unaffected the way 10-year-old boys do. "Hey, baby," Sarah said, crouching down to catch Emma in a hug. "Did you have fun making cookies?" "We made so many cookies, Mommy. Sugar cookies and gingerbread men, and Aunt Linda let me put the sprinkles on, and I only ate 4 of them." "Only 4, huh?" "Okay, maybe 5. But Jake ate more." "Did not," Jake said automatically. Sarah stood up, keeping Emma's hand in hers. "Listen, guys. Before we go inside, I need to tell you something. We have guests." Jake's eyebrows rose. "Guests? Who?" "An older couple, Harold and Dorothy. I met them today and they They needed a place to stay, so I invited them to spend Christmas with us. Emma's eyes went wide. Strangers? Are they nice strangers? Very nice, Sarah assured her. But they've had a hard day, so I need you both to be on your best behavior. Be kind, be welcoming. Can you do that for me? Jake was studying her face with an intensity that reminded Sarah, painfully, of Marcus. That same analytical gaze, that same ability to see through surface explanations to the truth beneath. What happened to them? He asked quietly. Why do they need a place to stay? Sarah hesitated. How much truth did a 10-year-old need? How much could he handle? Their son let them down, she said finally. Sometimes family disappoints us. And when that happens, it's up to other people to step in. That's what we're doing. Stepping in. Jake considered this for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Dad would have done the same thing. The words hit Sarah like a wave, because Jake was right. Marcus would have done the same thing. Marcus would have been the first one to stop at that bus station, the first one to offer help, the first one to bring two strangers home on Christmas Eve. Yeah, Sarah said, her voice thick. Yeah, he would have. Then it's the right thing to do, Jake said simply. And that was that. They went inside together, Linda trailing behind with a watchful expression. Sarah led the kids into the living room, where Harold and Dorothy were still sitting on the couch, looking nervous and out of place. Harold, Dorothy, Sarah said warmly. These are my children. This is Emma, and this is Jake, and this is my sister, Linda. Emma, never shy, marched right up to Dorothy and stuck out her hand. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm 7. Do you like Christmas? Dorothy's face transformed. The exhaustion, the grief, the fear, all of it melted away, replaced by a smile so genuine it made Sarah's chest ache. Hello, Emma, Dorothy said, shaking the tiny hand with exaggerated formality. I'm Dorothy. I'm 81, and I love Christmas. It's my favorite holiday. Mine too, Emma beamed. Do you know any Christmas songs? I know all the Christmas songs. Mommy says I sing them too much, but I don't think you can sing Christmas songs too much. Do you? I don't think you can either, Dorothy agreed. In fact, I think we should probably sing more Christmas songs. The world would be a better place if everyone sang more Christmas songs. And then, without warning, Dorothy began to sing. Silent Night, Holy Night. Her voice was thin and wavering, but it was beautiful, hauntingly beautiful. The kind of voice that had probably filled church choirs 60 years ago, now aged but still pure. Emma's mouth dropped open. Then, slowly, she joined in. All is calm, all is bright. Sarah watched, frozen in place, as her daughter and this elderly stranger sang together in her living room. Dorothy's eyes were closed, lost in the music. Emma was watching her with wonder, following her lead, their voices twining together like they'd been singing together for years. Linda moved to stand beside Sarah. Okay, she whispered. I get it now. Yeah? Yeah. Linda's voice was soft. She's not a stranger anymore, is she? Not really. Jake had drifted over to where Harold was sitting. The old man was watching his wife sing, tears streaming openly down his weathered cheeks. She used to sing in the church choir, Harold said quietly, not taking his eyes off Dorothy. 40 years. Lead soprano. Even after the dementia started, she never forgot the songs. Everything else goes, but the music stays. Jake sat down next to him, silent for a moment. Then, my dad used to sing too. Not good. Really bad, actually. But he'd sing anyway, just to make us laugh. Harold turned to look at the boy. Your father? He's the man in the photographs? Jake nodded, his jaw tight. He died 8 months ago. I'm sorry, son. That's a hard thing to carry. Yeah. Jake was quiet for a moment. Do you build stuff? Mom said you were a carpenter. Harold nodded slowly. 50 years in the trade. Built houses, furniture, cabinets. Built our home, the one Kevin sold. Put in every nail, sanded every board. Dad used to build things with me, Jake said. In the garage. We were making a birdhouse before he got sick. We never finished it. Something passed between them. Some understanding that Sarah, watching from across the room, couldn't quite name. Two people who had lost something irreplaceable, recognizing that loss in each other. Maybe, Harold said carefully, if your mother has some tools, maybe we could finish it together, if you'd like. Jake's face did something complicated. Hope and pain and longing all mixed together? Yeah, he said finally. I'd like that. The song ended. Emma was beaming up at Dorothy like she'd just discovered a new best friend. Dorothy was wiping tears from her eyes, but she was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since Sarah had found her on that bench. That was beautiful, Linda said, stepping forward. Dorothy, right? I'm Linda, Sarah's sister. It's nice to meet you. She shook both their hands, and Sarah could see her sister's protective skepticism melting in real time. Because how could anyone look at these two people, this elderly couple who had been thrown away by their own son, and see anything but fellow human beings in need? Dinner that night was ham and mashed potatoes and green beans. Nothing fancy, but warm and filling. They ate at the dining room table, all 6 of them crowded around a table meant for 4, elbows bumping and dishes passing, and conversation flowing more easily than Sarah had expected. Dorothy told stories about teaching 3rd grade for 35 years. Harold talked about the houses he'd built, the furniture he'd crafted, the satisfaction of making something with your hands. Emma peppered them both with questions, fascinated by people who had lived so long, seen so much. And Jake talked more than he had in months. About his dad, about the things they used to do together, about the birdhouse they'd never finished. We'll finish it, Harold said firmly. Tomorrow, if your mother says it's okay. A man should always finish what he starts. Jake looked at Sarah, hope in his eyes. Mom? Of course, Sarah said. I think that's a wonderful idea. Later, after dinner and more Christmas songs and Emma showing Dorothy her entire stuffed animal collection one by one, Sarah helped Harold carry their suitcases to the guest room. It was small, just a double bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard, but Dorothy acted like it was the Ritz. It's perfect, she said, running her hand over the quilt. Absolutely perfect. It's not much, Sarah started. It's a room, Harold said firmly, with a bed and heat and people who don't see us as problems to be solved. He cleared his throat, emotion thickening his voice. Sarah, what you did today, taking in strangers, bringing us into your home, sharing your holiday with us. I've lived 83 years, and I've never seen such kindness from someone who had every reason to keep walking. I had reasons to stop too, Sarah said quietly. Harold studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. The grief, he said. I see it in you, the same way I see it in your boy. You're still carrying it. Sarah didn't deny it, couldn't deny it. My wife is going to forget everything, Harold said. The doctors said 3 to 5 years, maybe more, maybe less. One day she won't remember my name, won't remember Kevin, won't remember our life together, his voice cracked, but she'll remember kindness. That stays. That always stays. And what you did today, she'll carry that with her into whatever comes next. So thank you. From the bottom of whatever's left of my heart, thank you. Sarah couldn't speak. She just nodded, squeezed his hand, and left them to settle in. Later, after the kids were asleep, Emma dreaming of Santa, Jake clutching the half-finished birdhouse he'd retrieved from the garage, Sarah sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the living room. And for the first time in 8 months, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt peaceful. Linda had left an hour ago, hugging Sarah tightly at the door. You did a good thing, she'd whispered. A crazy thing, but a good thing. Marcus would be proud. Marcus would be proud. Sarah held on to those words as she sat in the quiet. Tomorrow would bring problems, questions, the looming reality that Harold and Dorothy couldn't stay in her guest room forever. There would be social services to call, options to explore, a future to figure out. But tonight was Christmas Eve. Tonight, 2 people who had been thrown away had found shelter. Tonight, her daughter had sung with a woman who might not remember the song tomorrow. Tonight, her son had smiled, really smiled, for the first time since his father died. Tonight, Sarah thought maybe she'd done something right. Christmas morning arrived with Emma's shriek of delight, echoing through the house at 6:15 in the morning. Santa came! Santa came! Mommy, wake up! Santa came. Sarah stumbled out of bed, exhausted but smiling, and found her daughter already tearing into presents under the tree. Jake was there too, pretending to be too old for excitement but fooling no one. And standing in the hallway, watching with wonder in their eyes, were Harold and Dorothy. "I hope we're not intruding," Harold said quietly. "We heard the commotion and—" "You're not intruding," Sarah assured him. "Come, sit. This is your Christmas too." Dorothy's eyes welled up. "We don't have anything for the children. We didn't know. We couldn't. You being here is enough," Sarah said firmly. "Trust me." And it was. Watching Emma open her presents with Dorothy beside her, explaining each gift in elaborate detail. Watching Jake show Harold the new set of woodworking tools Sarah had bought him, tools she'd purchased months ago, hoping they might help him feel close to Marcus again. Watching two broken families come together on a morning that could have been devastating but instead felt almost whole. Almost. Marcus's absence was still there, a phantom limb that ached with every tradition, every memory. But for the first time since he died, the ache was bearable, shared, diluted by the presence of other people who understood loss. After the presents were opened and breakfast was eaten, pancakes shaped like Christmas trees, a tradition Marcus had started when Jake was 3, Harold turned to Jake with a serious expression. "So," he said, "about that birdhouse." Jake's face lit up. "Really? Today? No better day than Christmas to finish something important, if your mother approves." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "The garage is all yours." She watched from the kitchen window as Harold and Jake walked to the garage together. The old man moved slowly, his joints stiff from years of hard labor and the recent trauma of sitting in the cold for 6 hours. But there was purpose in his step, a reason to move forward. And Jake was practically bouncing beside him, asking questions, gesturing with his hands the way Marcus used to when he got excited about a project. "He looks happy." Sarah turned. Dorothy had come to stand beside her, also watching through the window. "He does," Sarah agreed. "He hasn't looked like that in a long time." "Harold's good with children," Dorothy said. "Always was. Kevin used to follow him around the workshop like a little shadow, wanted to learn everything his daddy knew." Her voice caught. "I don't know what happened to that boy, where we lost him." Sarah didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure there was one. "Can I help with something?" Dorothy asked, turning away from the window. "I feel useless just sitting around. I was a teacher for 35 years. I'm not used to being idle. Do you want to help me with lunch?" Dorothy's face brightened. "I'd love that." They worked side by side in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for soup, rolling out dough for biscuits. Dorothy's hands knew the motions even when her mind wandered. Sarah noticed her pause sometimes, staring at a knife or a cutting board, like she wasn't quite sure how she'd gotten there. But then she'd shake it off and keep going, muscle memory carrying her through. "My mother had dementia," Sarah said quietly, not sure why she was sharing this. "Toward the end, she'd forget my name sometimes, forget she had daughters at all." Dorothy's hands stilled. Was she scared? Sometimes, but mostly she was peaceful, like she'd let go of all the things that used to worry her. The forgetting wasn't always bad. She forgot the hard stuff too. "I'm scared," Dorothy admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not of forgetting, of being a burden, of making Harold's life harder than it already is, of being the reason, Kevin." She stopped, unable to finish. Sarah set down her knife and turned to face the older woman. "Dorothy, listen to me. You are not the reason Kevin did what he did. That's on him, his choice, his failure, not yours. But if I weren't sick, then he would have found another excuse. People who abandon their parents don't do it because of circumstances. They do it because of character. And Kevin's character was lacking long before your diagnosis." Dorothy stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. "You're very wise for someone so young." Sarah laughed, actually laughed, a sound she barely recognized anymore. "I'm 38. That's not young." "It is to me," Dorothy said with a small smile. "Everyone under 60 is young to me." Emma burst into the kitchen then, demanding to know when lunch would be ready because she was starving to absolute death. And the moment passed, but something had shifted between Sarah and Dorothy. An understanding, a connection that went beyond circumstance. The days between Christmas and New Year's Eve passed in a rhythm that surprised Sarah with its comfort. Harold and Jake spent hours in the garage, the sound of hammers and saws drifting through the house. Dorothy and Emma became inseparable, the old woman teaching the little girl songs and stories and old-fashioned games like cat's cradle and jacks. And Sarah? Sarah found herself breathing easier than she had in months. There was something about having a full house, about cooking for more than 3 people, about hearing laughter echo off the walls again. It didn't erase the grief. Nothing could do that, but it made it bearable, livable. On December 27th, Sarah started making phone calls. She called social services first, explaining the situation as best she could. An elderly couple, abandoned by their son, no money, no home, no resources. The woman on the phone was sympathetic, but not encouraging. "There are programs," she said, "but they take time. Waiting lists, paperwork, evaluations. If they need immediate housing, there are shelters." "They're not going to a shelter," Sarah said firmly. "They're staying with me until we figure something out." "That's very generous of you. But you should know, you have no legal authority over them. If their son decides to get involved, their son abandoned them at a bus station on Christmas Eve. I don't think he's going to be getting involved." The social worker sighed. "You'd be surprised. Family situations are complicated. If there are assets involved, if there's money, there's no money. Their son took everything. Then you might want to talk to a lawyer. What you're describing sounds like elder abuse, financial exploitation. If they wanted to press charges, I'll mention it to them," Sarah said. "Thank you." She hung up, feeling more overwhelmed than before. Lawyers, charges, legal authority. This was so much bigger than a guest room and some warm soup. This was a crisis. A real crisis with real implications and no easy solutions. That night, after the kids were in bed, and Harold and Dorothy had retired to the guest room, Sarah sat at her computer and started researching. Elder abuse laws, financial exploitation of the elderly, adult protective services. The more she read, the angrier she got. What Kevin had done wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. He'd sold their house, a house they'd owned outright for decades, and kept all the money. He'd promised to care for them and then abandoned them in the middle of winter. He'd left 2 vulnerable people, one with dementia, stranded at a bus station with nothing but 2 suitcases and the clothes on their backs. In most states, that was prosecutable. But prosecution required Harold and Dorothy to press charges. And from what Sarah had seen, Harold was too proud to involve the authorities, and Dorothy was too confused to fully understand what had happened. She closed the laptop and rubbed her eyes. Tomorrow. She'd talk to Harold tomorrow. But tomorrow brought something she didn't expect. December 28th. Sarah was at work, a half shift at the hospital, covering for a colleague who wanted time with her family. She'd left Harold and Dorothy with Jake and Emma, trusting her 10-year-old to call if anything went wrong. It wasn't ideal, but it was only 4 hours, and Jake had proven himself responsible beyond his years since Marcus died. Her phone buzzed during her lunch break. A text from Linda. "Have you seen Facebook?" Sarah frowned. "No." "Why?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Just look. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would blow up like this." Sarah's stomach dropped. She opened Facebook and searched for Linda's profile. And there it was. A post from 3 days ago, Christmas Day, that Linda had shared publicly. "My sister did something incredible yesterday. She found an elderly couple abandoned at the bus station, abandoned on Christmas Eve by their own son, and brought them home. Harold, 83, and Dorothy, 81, had nowhere to go. Their son sold their house, took all their money, and left them stranded in the cold." Sarah didn't hesitate. She opened her door and her heart, even though she's still grieving the loss of her husband earlier this year. This is what Christmas is really about. Please share this to remind people that kindness still exists and that some people don't deserve the parents they have. Below the post were photos. Harold and Dorothy on Sarah's couch, looking overwhelmed but grateful. Emma and Dorothy singing together by the Christmas tree. Jake and Harold in the garage, working on the birdhouse. The post had been shared over 2,000 times. Sarah's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the comments. Most were supportive, people praising her kindness, expressing outrage at Kevin, sharing their own stories of elder neglect. but some were different. Does anyone know who the son is? He should be exposed. This is in Oregon, right? Someone find this guy. I think I know who this is. There's Kevin Whitmore in Portland who works in real estate. His parents' names are Harold and Dorothy, same ages. And then, the comment that made Sarah's blood run cold. Update. Someone contacted Kevin Whitmore. He's claiming his parents are mentally ill and escaped from a care facility. He says this woman kidnapped them. He's threatening legal action. Sarah's phone rang. Linda. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I just wanted to share what you did, and people started commenting, and it just... Linda, stop. It's okay. Sarah's voice was calmer than she felt. What's done is done. But I need you to do something for me. Anything. Find out everything you can about Kevin Whitmore. Where he lives, where he works, what he's saying. If he's really threatening legal action, I need to know what we're dealing with. Okay, I can do that. Sarah, I'm really sorry. I never thought. I know. It's okay. Just find out what you can. She hung up and stared at the phone in her hand. Kidnapped. Kevin was telling people she'd kidnapped his parents. The same parents he'd abandoned at a bus station with nothing. The same parents whose house he'd sold and whose money he'd stolen. The audacity of it took her breath away. She finished her shift on autopilot, her mind racing. When she got home, Harold was in the living room, staring at Dorothy's phone, an old flip phone that Kevin had insisted they keep for emergencies. He called? Harold said flatly. Kevin called. Sarah sat down across from him. What did he say? That we need to come home. That this woman, you, have manipulated us. That he's been worried sick and trying to find us. Harold's voice dripped with contempt. Worried sick? The man who left us to freeze. There's more, Sarah said gently. A post about you went viral. People are talking about it, and Kevin is telling everyone that I kidnapped you. Harold's jaw tightened. That's a lie. I know it is. But if he decides to pursue it, if he gets lawyers involved, this could get complicated. Then we'll tell the truth. We'll tell everyone what he did. Are you willing to do that? Sarah asked carefully. Press charges? Talk to the police? Go on record about everything? Harold was quiet for a long moment. In the kitchen, Dorothy was humming Christmas carols while Emma helped her make hot chocolate. The sound was so peaceful, so at odds with the storm brewing around them. He's my son, Harold finally said. My only child. For 50 years, I protected him, made excuses for him, blamed myself when he disappointed us, blamed Valerie, blamed everyone but him. He looked up at Sarah, and his eyes were hard. I'm done protecting him. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one. You might not have to, Sarah said. The court of public opinion is already on your side. If Kevin pushes this, he'll only make himself look worse. You don't know Kevin, Harold said darkly. When he wants something, he doesn't stop. He doesn't care how it looks or who gets hurt. He just takes. What does he want? You said there's no money left. Harold's expression flickered. Something crossed his face. Guilt? Fear? Before he smoothed it away. Harold, Sarah said slowly, is there something you're not telling me? The old man was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily, the weight of decades pressing down on his shoulders. There's an account, he said quietly. Dorothy doesn't know about it. I opened it 40 years ago, after my father died. He left me some money, and I put it aside. Didn't touch it, just let it sit there, earning interest in case of emergencies. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How much? Last I checked, Harold swallowed. $180,000. $180,000 sitting in a bank account. Money that Kevin apparently didn't know about until now. How would Kevin find out about this account? Sarah asked. I don't know. Maybe he went through our papers after he sold the house. Maybe he found an old statement. I was careful, but Harold shook his head. If he knows, that's why he's coming. Not because he misses us, not because he's worried, because he wants that money. Everything clicked into place. The viral post, Kevin's sudden concern for his kidnapped parents, the legal threats. This wasn't about Harold and Dorothy at all. This was about $180,000 that Kevin felt entitled to. Does he have any legal claim to it? Sarah asked. It's in my name only. Always has been. But if he convinces a court that I'm not competent to manage my own affairs, Harold's voice trailed off. He'd need a conservatorship, proof that you can't make decisions for yourself. That's not easy to get. Dorothy has dementia, Harold said quietly, and I'm 83 years old. How hard do you think it would be for a slick real estate agent with money and lawyers to convince a judge that we can't take care of ourselves? Sarah wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because Harold was right. The system wasn't designed to protect people like him and Dorothy. It was designed to be exploited by people like Kevin. "What do you want to do?" she asked. Harold looked toward the kitchen, where his wife was laughing at something Emma had said. That laugh, bright and pure and untouched by the chaos swirling around them, seemed to ground him. "I want to protect her," he said. "That's all I've ever wanted. To give her a safe place to land when the world gets confusing, to make sure she's cared for when I'm gone." He turned back to Sarah. "If fighting Kevin protects her, I'll fight. If walking away protects her, I'll walk away, whatever it takes." "You shouldn't have to walk away from what's rightfully yours," Sarah said firmly. "That money is yours. You earned it. You saved it. Kevin has no right to it. Rights don't matter much when you're old and tired and everyone sees you as a burden." "I don't see you that way," Sarah said, "and neither do my kids, and neither will anyone else who hears the truth about what Kevin did." Harold studied her for a long moment. "Why do you care so much? We're strangers. You've got your own grief, your own children, your own life. Why fight for us?" Sarah thought about the question, really thought about it, because the truth was complicated, a tangle of grief and guilt and something she couldn't quite name. "Because Marcus would have wanted me to," she finally said. "Because my kids deserve to see that kindness matters. Because Dorothy reminds me of my mother, and Harold, you remind me of Marcus, stubborn and proud and too damn loyal to people who don't deserve it." She paused. "And because I was alone at that bus station too. Not literally. But I've spent the past 8 months feeling abandoned, forgotten, thrown away by a universe that took my husband and left me with nothing but bills and grief and 2 kids who need me to be stronger than I am. You and Dorothy walked into my life at the exact moment I was about to fall apart. Maybe I'm helping you, or maybe you're helping me. Either way, we're in this together now." Harold's eyes were wet when she finished. He didn't speak, maybe couldn't speak, but he reached out and squeezed her hand. A silent "thank you," a silent promise. The rest of that day passed in tense waiting. Kevin didn't call again. The Facebook comments continued to multiply, some supportive, some accusatory, most just curious about what would happen next. December 29th, December 30th. Sarah went through the motions of normal life while preparing for battle. She contacted a lawyer, a friend of a friend who specialized in elder law, and explained the situation. The lawyer's advice was cautious, but encouraging. If Harold and Dorothy are willing to testify that they were abandoned, that Kevin took their money without permission, that's a strong case for financial exploitation, but it has to be their choice. They have to be willing to go on record. Harold was willing. Dorothy, on her good days, understood enough to be angry. On her bad days, she asked when Kevin was coming to pick them up, and Harold had to explain all over again that Kevin wasn't coming. Those days were the hardest. New Year's Eve arrived with a cold snap that dropped temperatures into the single digits. Sarah had planned a quiet celebration, sparkling cider for the kids, real champagne for the adults, a movie marathon until midnight. Nothing fancy, just warmth and safety and the promise of a new year. At 8:47 in the evening, there was a knock at the door. Sarah's heart seized. She looked at Harold, who had gone pale. "Stay here," she said. "I'll handle it." She walked to the front door, her pulse pounding in her ears. Through the frosted glass, she could see a figure, tall, male, wearing an expensive coat. She opened the door. Kevin Whitmore was 49 years old. He had his father's height, but none of his warmth. His face was handsome in a cold, calculated way, the kind of face you'd see in a real estate ad, all white teeth and false sincerity. He was flanked by a woman who had to be Valerie, blonde, polished, dripping with the kind of money that looked down on everyone else. "Mrs. Mitchell," Kevin said smoothly, "I'm here for my parents." Sarah stood in the doorway of her home, the cold December air biting at her face, and looked at the man who had abandoned his elderly parents at a bus station on Christmas Eve. Kevin Whitmore didn't look like a monster. That was the thing about monsters. They rarely did. He looked like a successful businessman, a pillar of the community, the kind of man who sat on charity boards and gave speeches about family values. His coat probably cost more than Sarah's monthly mortgage payment. His watch glinted under the porch light, a Rolex, she was pretty sure. Everything about him screamed money and status and respectability. But Sarah had held his mother while she cried. She'd watched his father give up his coat in 19-degree weather. She knew exactly what kind of man Kevin Whitmore really was. "I'm sorry," she said calmly. "I don't think we've met." Kevin's smile tightened. "I think you know exactly who I am, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm Kevin Whitmore, Harold and Dorothy's son, and I'm here to take them home." "Home?" Sarah tilted her head. "That's interesting, because from what I understand, you sold their home 3 months ago. So where exactly would you be taking them?" Valerie made a small, impatient sound. "Kevin, we don't have time for this. Just call the police and tell them this woman is holding your parents against their will." "That's a very serious accusation," Sarah said, her voice still calm, "and also completely untrue. Your parents-in-law are here because they chose to be, because when they had nowhere else to go, when the son they raised and loved and sacrificed for left them stranded in the freezing cold, a stranger showed them more kindness than their own family." Kevin's jaw tightened. "I don't know what lies they've told you." "Lies?" Sarah actually laughed. "Harold and Dorothy are the most honest people I've ever met. Unlike some people, apparently. I want to see my parents." Kevin's voice had dropped the pretense of politeness. "Now, that's up to them, not me." She stepped aside, opening the door wider, not because she wanted Kevin in her home, but because she knew Harold needed to face his son, needed to say the things he'd been holding inside for years. This confrontation had been building for decades, and it wasn't Sarah's place to stop it. Kevin strode into the house like he owned it, Valerie clicking behind him on heels that were completely impractical for an Oregon winter. They stopped in the living room doorway. Harold was standing by the fireplace, Dorothy seated on the couch beside Emma. Jake had positioned himself between the elderly couple and the door, protective, defiant, so much like his father that it made Sarah's heart ache. "Dad?" Kevin's voice had shifted again, softer now, almost gentle, the voice of a man who knew how to manipulate. "Thank God you're okay. We've been worried sick." Harold didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at his son with an expression Sarah had never seen before. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something colder, something final. "Mom." Kevin turned to Dorothy, his face arranged in what he probably thought was concern. "Mom, it's me. It's Kevin. I'm here to take you home." Dorothy looked at him blankly for a moment. Then recognition flickered in her eyes, and with it, something that looked like fear. "Kevin," she said softly, "you left us at the bus station. You said you couldn't do it anymore." "Mom, that's not—" "I didn't mean—" Kevin shot a glance at Sarah, as if blaming her for his mother's memory. "You're confused. Your condition makes you confused. That's why you need to come with me, so we can get you proper care." "She's not confused," Harold said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 83 years. "Not about this. She remembers exactly what you did. So do I." "Dad, listen." "No." Harold held up a hand. "For 50 years, I've listened. I've made excuses. I've blamed myself, blamed Valerie, blamed everyone but you. I told myself you were just busy, just stressed, just going through a phase. I told myself that the boy who used to help me in the workshop, who brought his mother flowers on her birthday, who cried at his grandmother's funeral, I told myself that boy was still in there somewhere." He took a step toward Kevin, and despite the fact that Harold was old and frail and Kevin was in the prime of his life, it was Kevin who stepped back. "But that boy is gone," Harold continued. "Maybe he was never really there. Maybe I just wanted to believe in him so badly that I invented him. Either way, I'm done. Done making excuses. Done protecting you. Done pretending that what you did to us, what you've been doing to us for years, is anything other than what it is. And what's that?" Kevin's voice had an edge to it now. The mask was slipping. "Abuse!" Harold said the word clearly, deliberately. You sold our home without our real consent. You took $300,000 that belonged to us. You isolated us from friends and family. You made us dependent on you and then threw us away when we became inconvenient. That's not a family disagreement, Kevin. That's elder abuse. And I'm done pretending it isn't. The room was silent. Emma had pressed herself against Dorothy's side, her small face confused and frightened. Jake stood rigid, his hands clenched into fists. Sarah watched Kevin's expression cycle through shock, denial, and finally settle on something ugly. You ungrateful. Kevin caught himself, visibly struggling to maintain control. Everything I did for you. Selling that house? It was falling apart. You couldn't maintain it. You couldn't even climb the stairs anymore. I was trying to help. By keeping all the money? I was holding it for you, for your care. Do you have any idea how expensive memory care facilities are? I was trying to plan for your future. Our future? Harold's laugh was bitter. You put us on a bus with 2 suitcases and told us to figure it out. That was your plan for our future? I panicked, okay? Kevin ran a hand through his hair, messing up its perfect styling. Valerie and we've got our own problems. The business isn't doing well. The kids need things. I needed some time to figure things out, and you were pressuring me. And I snapped. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. A mistake, Dorothy repeated softly. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. A mistake is saying something hurtful in anger. Leaving your parents to freeze on Christmas Eve isn't a mistake, Kevin. It's a choice. Everyone turned to look at Dorothy. Her voice was clear, her eyes focused. This was one of her good moments. Crystal clarity cutting through the fog of her condition. I remember everything, she said. I remember you telling us we were too much. I remember the sound of your voice when you said you couldn't do this anymore. I remember Harold giving me his coat because you left us in the cold with nothing. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice didn't waver. I carried you for 9 months. I held you when you cried. I sat up with you when you were sick, helped you with your homework, cheered at every game, dried every tear. And you threw me away like I was nothing. Mom, I'm not finished. Dorothy's voice hardened. I'm losing my mind, Kevin. Piece by piece, day by day, I'm disappearing. And the last clear memory I'm going to have of my son, the boy I would have died for, is him abandoning me at a bus station because I became inconvenient. Kevin's face had gone pale. For a moment, just a moment, Sarah thought she saw something human in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or guilt. But then it was gone, replaced by that cold calculation she'd seen when he first walked through her door. This is ridiculous, he said flatly. You're both clearly not in your right minds. Dad, you're letting a stranger manipulate you. Mom, you have dementia. You can't trust your own memories. I'm your son. I'm the one who's supposed to take care of you. Then why didn't you? Jake's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at the 10-year-old boy who had positioned himself like a soldier guarding his post. Why didn't you take care of them? Jake repeated. They're your parents. They raised you. They loved you. And you just left them. My dad, his voice cracked, but he pushed through. My dad died. He didn't choose to leave us. He fought so hard to stay. He would have given anything for more time with us. And you have your parents right here, alive, and you threw them away like garbage. Jake was crying now, tears streaming down his face, but he didn't look away from Kevin. You don't deserve them, he said. You don't deserve any parents at all. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Sarah saw something shift in Harold's expression, a fierce pride, a gratitude, a recognition of something kindred in this boy who had lost so much and still found the courage to speak truth to a grown man. Kevin's face had flushed red. Who the hell do you think you are, kid? This is none of your business. This is a family matter. They are family, Sarah said, stepping forward. Maybe not by blood, but they're more family to us after 1 week than you've been to them in years. This is insane. Kevin turned to Valerie, who had been standing silent through the entire exchange. Call the police. Tell them this woman has brainwashed my parents. Tell them she's holding them against their will. Valerie didn't move. She was staring at Dorothy with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. Val, Kevin snapped. Did you hear me? I heard you. Valerie's voice was quiet. I've been hearing you for 20 years, Kevin. Every excuse, every justification, every time you promised to visit them and didn't. Every time you said they were too demanding, too needy, too much work. She looked at her husband with something like disgust. But I never thought you'd actually do it. Leave them at a bus station on Christmas Eve. I thought even you had limits. You're taking their side? There are no sides here. There's just the truth. And the truth is, what your father said, what you've been doing to them, is abuse. I enabled it. I looked the other way. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere with your family. Valerie's voice hardened. But watching your mother cry, watching your father stand there with a broken heart, I can't look away anymore. Kevin stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before. You can't be serious. I want a divorce. The word landed like a bomb. Kevin actually staggered back a step. What? I've been thinking about it for years, Valerie said calmly. But I kept telling myself things would get better, that you'd change, that the man I married was still there somewhere. She glanced at Harold. Sound familiar? Harold nodded slowly. It does. Valerie, you can't. We have children. Children who've been watching you treat your parents like burdens for their entire lives. Children who've learned that family is disposable when it becomes inconvenient. Valerie shook her head. I won't let them grow up to be like you. I won't let them think this is normal. Kevin's face had gone from red to white. The composed, confident businessman who'd walked through Sarah's door 30 minutes ago was crumbling before their eyes. This is insane, he repeated, but his voice had lost its conviction. You're all insane. Maybe, Sarah said, or maybe we're the first people who've ever told you the truth. You can't buy your way out of this, Kevin. You can't charm your way out. You can't manipulate your way out. Your parents know who you really are now. Your wife knows. Your children will know. And thanks to that Facebook post, the whole world knows too. Kevin's eyes narrowed. That post? You did that on purpose. You wanted to destroy me. I didn't even know about the post until after it went viral. My sister shared a story about kindness on Christmas. She didn't name you. She didn't identify you. The internet did that on their own, because people were outraged by what you did. Because decent human beings couldn't believe that anyone would abandon their elderly parents in the freezing cold. I'll sue you, Kevin said, for defamation, for kidnapping, for what? Sarah cut in. Everything that's been said is true. Your parents will testify to that. Your wife, apparently, will testify to that. You have no case, Kevin. You have nothing. I have lawyers. I have money. You have $300,000 that you stole from your parents, Harold said quietly. And I suspect you've already spent most of it, haven't you? On that watch, on that coat, on whatever lifestyle you've been trying to maintain while your business fails. Kevin didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Here's what's going to happen, Harold continued, his voice steady and strong in a way Sarah hadn't heard before. You're going to leave this house. You're going to transfer whatever remains of the money from the house sale into an account in my name. And you're going to stay away from us, from me, from your mother, from these good people who took us in when you left us to die. And if I don't, then I press charges. Financial exploitation of the elderly. Abandonment. Whatever else my lawyer says will stick. Harold's eyes were hard. You think that Facebook post was bad for your reputation? Wait until you're facing criminal charges. Wait until your picture is in the paper next to the words elder abuse. See how your business does then. Kevin's face contorted with rage. For a moment, Sarah thought he might actually attack his father, this frail old man who had finally found the courage to stand up to his son. She stepped forward, ready to intervene, but she didn't have to. Jake moved first. The 10-year-old boy positioned himself directly between Kevin and Harold, his chin raised, his eyes defiant. You heard him, Jake said. Leave. Kevin looked at this child, this stranger's child, standing in defense of parents that Kevin himself had abandoned, and something in him seemed to break. Fine, he said, his voice hollow. You want to throw your lot in with strangers? You want to pretend these people are your family? Fine. But don't come crying to me when they get tired of you too. Don't expect me to pick up the pieces when this woman realizes that two elderly dependents are more than she bargained for. I won't get tired of them, Sarah said calmly. Because I'm not you. Kevin had no response to that. He turned and walked toward the door, then stopped, looking back at his mother one last time. Mom, he said, and for just a moment, his voice cracked. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean I never wanted. Dorothy looked at her son, this man she had created, nurtured, loved unconditionally for 49 years, and she said the hardest words a mother ever has to say. Goodbye, Kevin. Not, I forgive you. Not, it's okay. Just goodbye. A door closing. A chapter ending. Kevin's face crumpled. He opened his mouth to say something else, but Valerie took his arm. Let's go, she said quietly. There's nothing more to say here. They left. The door closed behind them, and the house fell silent. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dorothy made a small sound. A whimper, really. And Harold was at her side in an instant, gathering her into his arms. It's okay, he murmured into her hair. It's okay, Dot. It's over. We're safe. I told him goodbye, Dorothy whispered. My baby. I told him goodbye. I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I'm not. Dorothy pulled back, looking up at her husband with wet eyes, but a steady voice. I'm not sorry. He needed to hear it. He needed to know that there are consequences, that he can't just... She broke off, struggling for the words that sometimes eluded her. He can't just throw people away and expect them to be there when he needs them again. No, Harold agreed softly. He can't. Emma, who had been watching the entire confrontation with wide eyes, suddenly crawled onto the couch and wrapped her small arms around Dorothy. Don't be sad, she said. You still have us. You still have me and Jake and Mommy. We won't throw you away. We promise. Dorothy let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and hugged the little girl tightly. I know, sweetheart. I know you won't. Sarah found herself crying too, tears she hadn't even felt building, streaming down her face. She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to see Harold standing beside her. Thank you, he said, for everything, for stopping at that bus station, for bringing us home, for standing up to Kevin, for... He gestured around the room, at Dorothy and Emma wrapped in each other's arms, at Jake standing tall and proud by the fireplace. For this, for giving us a family when our own family failed us. You gave us something too, Sarah said. You may not realize it, but you did. This house has been so empty since Marcus died, so quiet. And then you came, and suddenly there was life again. Laughter, purpose. She wiped her eyes. You didn't just find a family tonight, Harold. You gave one back to us. Later that night, after the tears had dried and the champagne had been opened and the ball had dropped on television, Sarah sat on the couch with Dorothy while Harold and Jake set off fireworks in the backyard, small ones, nothing fancy, but enough to make Emma shriek with delight. Can I tell you something? Dorothy asked, her voice soft and a little dreamy. She was tired. The confrontation had taken a lot out of her, but she'd refused to go to bed before midnight. Of course. I'm going to forget this. All of it. The confrontation with Kevin. The things I said. Meeting you and the children. Dorothy's eyes were clear but sad. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But eventually, I'll forget. That's how this disease works. It takes everything. Sarah's heart clenched. Dorothy. But here's what I want you to know. Dorothy took Sarah's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I may forget the details, the names, the faces, but I won't forget the feeling of being wanted, of being safe, of being loved. She squeezed Sarah's hand. That stays. Harold told me that once, that the feelings stay even when the memories go, and I believe him. So even when I don't remember your name, even when I look at you and don't know who you are, I'll feel it. The love, the kindness, the family. Sarah couldn't speak. She just held Dorothy's hand and let the tears fall. You're a good woman, Sarah Mitchell, Dorothy said. Your husband was lucky to have you, and so are we. Outside, a firework exploded in a shower of gold and silver. Emma's laughter rang through the cold night air, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Not just hope, but peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. 6 months later, the birdhouse was finished. It hung from the oak tree in Sarah's backyard, painted bright blue with a yellow roof. Jake's design, Harold's craftsmanship. Every morning, sparrows came to nest in it, and every morning, Jake would sit on the porch with his binoculars, watching them. "Dad would have loved this," he said one morning, as Sarah brought him hot chocolate. "The birdhouse, the birds, all of it." "He would have," Sarah agreed. "He would have been so proud of you." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think he sent them to us. Harold and Dorothy. I know that sounds crazy, but I think Dad knew we needed them, and they needed us. So he made it happen." Sarah thought about that cold day at the bus station, the moment she'd looked up and seen two elderly strangers huddled on a frozen bench. The inexplicable pull that had made her walk toward them instead of away. "I don't think that's crazy at all," she said. "Harold and Dorothy never left." What started as a temporary arrangement became permanent, first informally, then officially, when Sarah helped them navigate the legal system to become their designated caregivers. The guest room became their room. The house became their home. Kevin never came back. True to Harold's ultimatum, he transferred what remained of the house money, about $47,000, once his debts were paid, into his father's account. He and Valerie divorced 3 months later. The children, Lily and Michael, started visiting their grandparents for the first time in years, brought by their mother, who seemed determined to repair what her husband had broken. Dorothy's condition progressed, as the doctors said it would. Some days she knew exactly where she was and who everyone was. Other days, she thought Sarah was her sister, or Emma was a student from her old classroom, or Harold was a young man she'd just started dating. But she was never afraid, never alone, and she never stopped singing. The Facebook post had long since faded from public memory, replaced by newer outrages and newer inspirations. But occasionally, Sarah would get a message from a stranger, someone who'd seen the original post, someone who'd been inspired to reach out to an elderly neighbor, to check on an aging parent, to stop and help someone who seemed lost or alone. One message stayed with her more than the others. It was from a woman in Florida, a nurse like Sarah, who had read about Harold and Dorothy and been moved to visit her own estranged mother for the first time in 5 years. "You reminded me that kindness isn't just about the big gestures," the woman wrote. "Sometimes it's just about stopping, seeing someone who's invisible to everyone else, asking if they're okay. Thank you for reminding me to stop." Sarah thought about that message often, about all the people walking past each other every day, wrapped up in their own griefs and struggles and busyness, about how easy it was to not see, and how much could change when you chose to look. She thought about Marcus too, every day. But the grief had shifted over the months, from a crushing weight to a gentle presence. He was there in Jake's laugh, in Emma's stubborn streak, in the birdhouse that swayed in the summer breeze. He was there in the choice Sarah had made on that cold December day, a choice he would have made himself without hesitation. "Take care of people, Sarah. The way you took care of me," she was, and in doing so, she discovered something she hadn't expected. The people she took care of were taking care of her, too. Harold taught Jake woodworking and taught Sarah how to fix the leaky faucet that Marcus had never gotten around to. Dorothy sang with Emma and told stories about teaching and reminded Sarah every day that memory was less important than love. Together, they'd built something out of tragedy and abandonment and grief, something that looked a lot like a family. Not the family any of them had expected, not the family they'd been born into or married into, but a family nonetheless, chosen, forged, real. On the 1-year anniversary of the day they met, Sarah made dinner, ham and mashed potatoes and green beans, the same meal they'd shared that first Christmas Eve. They sat around the table, all 5 of them, and Harold raised his glass. "To Sarah," he said, who stopped when everyone else walked by. "To Harold and Dorothy," Sarah countered, "who showed up when we needed them most." "To Daddy," Emma added solemnly, "who's watching from heaven." "To family," Jake said quietly. "The kind you find, the kind you make, the kind that matters." They clinked their glasses together, wine for the adults, sparkling cider for the kids, and for a moment, the room was filled with something that felt almost sacred. gratitude, connection, love. Dorothy looked around the table, her eyes bright with tears and joy, and something that might have been confusion but was probably just wonder. "This is nice," she said softly. "This is very nice. I don't quite remember how we all got here, but I'm glad we did." Harold took her hand. "Me too, Dot. Me too." Sarah looked at her strange, beautiful, unexpected family, the grieving widow, the abandoned elders, the children learning that love could survive anything, and she smiled. Because sometimes the people who save you are the people you thought you were saving. Sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who refuses to leave you sitting alone in the cold. And sometimes, just sometimes, a single moment of kindness can change everything. Sarah had stopped at a bus station on Christmas Eve because two strangers needed help. She'd had no idea, in that moment, that she needed them just as much. But that's how it works, isn't it? The universe putting the right people in your path at the exact moment you're about to fall apart. The choice to stop instead of walking by. The courage to open your door, your home, your heart. It wasn't insane what Sarah had done. It wasn't even remarkable, really. It was just kindness. Simple, radical, life-changing kindness. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.